And I gotta say, I'm really impressed with this one. I think they did an excellent job adapting the Terraforming Mars game to a dice version. And I think it looks like a version that I think I might actually prefer because it simplifies a lot of things without sacrificing the core elements of the game. And just like in the original game, your goal is the same. You're trying to, well, terraform Mars. So that means planting forests, creating oceans, and trying to raise the oxygen and heat levels to make the planet inhabitable. And of course, doing all this will gain you victory points at the end of the game, but you can also gain victory points through other ways, like completing different objectives, or by fulfilling different requirements of your cards, or just buying cards that offer you victory points. And what makes this one different and what I really like is it removes that whole element of maintaining your resources and converting resources between other resources, because that's all handled by the dice. And the way this game works is that players are going to be taking turns performing actions, and they can either decide to have a production turn or an action turn. And if a player decides to have a production turn, they're going to reset any of their action cards that they've previously used, because each time you use one of your cards, you're going to be tapping it. Then you'll be able to draw a new card into your hand and then roll your dice depending on your production in the different areas. Each of the different areas are represented by a color, and depending on your production in that color, it's going to allow you to roll an amount of dice that are matching that color. And each of the dice will have 3 different icons of different rarities. So on a single die, you'll have 3 icons of your least rare resource, which could be something like science. And then you could have 2 icons of a more rare one, which would be like your money generation. Then you could have one. And then you'll have 1 icon on there that is the most rare, which could be something like a city, depending on the color of die that you're rolling, because each of them will be different. You'll be able to keep all those dice for your future turns, adding them to any dice that you've already rolled on a previous turn. But one thing to note about taking a production action is that you have to discard your dice down to 3 at the start of your turn, so you most likely won't want to take another production turn if you currently have a lot of dice in your possession. So let's talk about the action turn, and this is where you'll be able to spend your dice in order to perform various actions. You'll be able to perform 1 support action and 1 main action, but if you don't want to perform your main action, you can perform 2 support actions. And the support action is a little less powerful, but if you don't have enough resources in order to perform a main action, it does make sense to perform this one twice. And this is essentially going to allow you to gain another die or to manipulate the dice that you already have to turn them into something else. Then the main action usually means spending those dice in order to do things like gaining victory points, raising the temperature, or building cities, forests, or oceans in order to help terraform Mars. And any cards that you've collected, you'll be able to pay for to put into your tableau, but unlike the original Terraforming Mars game where those pretty much just cost money, these cards will have a few different requirements of the different icons on the dice, so you're going to have to spend those dice in order to put those cards into play, and you might have to spend dice as well in order to activate them once they are in play. And to me, that's the really impressive part of the way that this game works, because all that seems really elegant, how the dice are just used for pretty much everything. And you can really start to see how that builds your engine, because each of those cards can add more actions to your support or main actions, but they can also add more production of different types of dice, and sometimes even wild dice that just allow you which colored dice you want to add into your production when you take a production turn. And the game continues like this, with players taking turns deciding if they want to take a production turn or an action turn until Mars is fully terraformed, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game.